Secret of the Mimic is the latest and upcoming FNAF game releasing on June 13th, but today I'm going to solve the game before it even comes out. Secret of the Mimic is set to take place in 1979, the earliest game in the timeline we've gotten so far. While this game has the potential to shake up what we know about the early parts of the story, its main focus will be on the Mimic and its creator, Edwin Murray. Its main gameplay is set in the MCM facility, Murray's costume manor. From what we've been teased so far by Steelwall Studios, the main story has us in the shoes of a Fazbear employee who has been handed a heavily redacted corporate briefing with the task of entering the abandoned facility to collect the Mimic. A prototype endoskeleton with the ability to fit into any costume and become any character. The larger part of the story has been withheld, but with the help of the books, we can work up the main plot points for this game. A common conclusion I've seen people draw regarding the book debate is that the game contradicts them in numerous ways. Some of these talking points are: Edwin is a contractor, not an employee. The factory is larger with a lot more going on in contrast to the barren lace factory, with the factory being incredibly different in the games. If we are a team after Team B, it makes no sense in context for such a drastic change to have been made. Edwin has employees working under him rather than by himself. Edwin clearly has more money than his book counterpart. And lastly, the Mimic has been said to be constructed for Fazbear, not Edwin's son David. Examining these differences and comparing them to the Mimic story, it absolutely indicates that the games and books are separate continuities. However, herein lies the problem. People are assuming Secret of the Mimic is either adapting the Mimic story or is set shortly after Team B's failed attempt to sort out the mess left behind by Edwin. But let's take a step back and examine Secret of the Mimic with Edwin's full story from the books in mind. You'll find that this game is not meant to be a direct continuation of the Mimic story, but instead is intended to fill in the holes left by the books, specifically the Mimic, the storyteller, in the epilogues. The Mimic and the storyteller serve with Edwin's beginnings and his conclusion following any story format. We're missing the story's middle portion, and both tales hint at that. In The Storyteller, Edwin alludes to the fact that something happened in his past, something involving a white tiger, something that had scarred him for life. And there it was. There was the thing of Edwin's nightmares. Edwin gritted his teeth and held his breath again. He ignored the tremors that vibrated through his body. Not a real tiger head, obviously. If the thing the men were hefting were a real tiger head, Edwin wouldn't be as rattled as he was. Ha, he thought. Rattled was an understatement. He'd had a full-blown, nearly untethered from reality meltdown. No disembodied tiger head would have caused that unless it was like this tiger head. The sounds, a screech and a scream, his own yelling, the sights, blood, so much blood, a gut-clenching grimace, the smells. Edwin gagged at the metallic scent that suddenly assaulted his nostrils. He wanted to moan, he needed to run, but Edwin did neither. Even in his flashback, Edwin was aware that if he was found here, any chance he had of minimizing the storyteller's potential damage would be lost. When Edwin enters the storyteller tree for the first time, he has this to say. He took a step towards the tiger head and examined how it was interfaced with the wall. Was the tiger movable? Was it designed to be mobile? No, the tiger was stationary. It wouldn't suddenly come to life and attack. What he had hoped he wouldn't find was right there on the start screen. The storyteller was running a program called Mimic 1. No, Edwin whispered. His worst fears were confirmed. He'd known it. He'd tried to pretend he hadn't known it, but he'd known it from the very beginning. No wonder the Pizzaplex characters were changing. No wonder problems were cropping up all over the place. It was happening again, and Edwin had no idea what to do about it. An event involving the Mimic 1 program and a white tiger coming to life to attack is never depicted in the books. We know it can't be about David's death, as the Pizzaplex's systems and characters acting up reminded Edwin of this event. Not once do the books depict Mimic 1 running rampant around an establishment like in The Storyteller. But you know what game has a white tiger coming to life with Mimic running rampant? Secret of the Mimic. The storyteller leaves us with a few questions that if Secret of the Mimic intends to slot into the tale's timeline, it needs to answer. What did Edwin mean by "it was happening again"? Why did the White Tiger cause him a nearly untethered from reality meltdown? How did Edwin go from being a poor nobody employee to being a member of the board of directors? Why did his contract now allow him a scandalous salary? And how did Edwin manage to travel the world for 3 decades with no money? These questions show us that something occurred between these two stories that we have yet to see. But by using what we have with Secrets of the Mimic thus far, we can come to a reasonable answer for all of these. What did Edwin mean by "it was happening again"? The storyteller depicts attractions going haywire and the Pizzaplex systems going on the fritz since the installation of the storyteller tree, including amplifying the animatronic's worst traits tenfold. Secret of the Mimic presents us with the MCM facility, one which uses the Mimic 1 code in all of its products. We know this because the MCM archives have presented us with a coffee dispenser that loves to learn, a coat rack and a vacuum cleaner that can adapt to any needs one could ask for. All the abilities the Mimic Endos are described as having throughout the books. There is a very high likelihood that Edwin used the Mimic 1 program on all of the animatronics within the facility. Because of this, the original Endo was able to connect and control all of the hardware within the factory, resulting in a bloody massacre. We can assume this massacre has already occurred before the main gameplay because, as seen in the trailer, the bodies of employees have been stuffed into mascot costumes. Why did the White Tiger cause him a nearly untethered from reality meltdown? A white tiger with green and blue eyes had to be present for this massacre for it to be engraved so deep into Edwin's memories, which is exactly what we see in the trailer, a white tiger costume with green and blue eyes. My bets are that this costume was worn by the Mimic during the massacre, and guessing by the flickering lights welcoming the tiger's presence, one of the Mimic's abilities, it's safe to assume this is what we'll learn in the game. The last 3 questions can be answered in one swoop by the fact MCM is partially owned by Mariko. After Fazbear Entertainment gets its hands on the original Mimic, they come to learn of its programming and see its promise. Fazbear reaches out to Edwin with the promise of returning partial ownership of his company with a renegotiation of his buyout contract, in exchange for his expertise in mass producing a new line of Mimic endoskeletons for their current and planned business venues and characters. We know this is a possibility as the Mimic story foreshadows Edwin regaining his company. He still wasn't sure how the Mimic was learning so quickly, but he was very pleased with this development. Edwin was even starting to kick around ideas for how he could use the evolving program to get his company back. The Mimic 1 program, if it matured as Edwin hoped it would, could be applied to many tasks. Edwin's and Fazbear's newfound partnership not only explains why Edwin earned a huge salary in The Storyteller, but also explains how he was able to travel the world between the 2 stories, and how he managed to get a spot on the board of directors. Fazbear's partial ownership of Mariko and MCM explains why Edwin can create new products under his company name, while also accounting for the heavy Fazbear imagery throughout the facility. Edwin may have regained freedom over his company, but he is still limited by Fazbear's control. Now moving on to the Mimic story. There isn't much left unanswered by this story, given its nature as the beginning of Edwin's story. We've already covered the MCM foreshadowing presented. However, one question left unanswered is how Fazbear obtained the Mimic. Obviously, after Team B's failed attempt, Fazbear would send another team to fulfill the task that the others had failed to complete. But we never see this happen, we just know that they did. Following the aforementioned collection, Fazbear engineers developed the Model 2 line of endoskeletons. Endoskeletons with the ability to alter their shape and size to fit into any mascot costume. This line of animatronics is never showcased in the books. The only thing relating to them is that the original Mimic began mimicking animatronics in humans in unintended ways, resulting in a disaster. Fazbear decided to deactivate the remaining endos. I believe that Secrets of the Mimic will give us insights into this disaster. What leads me to believe that the Model 2s will make an appearance in this game is a feature showcased in 2 of MCM's products. As seen in the MCM archives, as established, the Mimic Model 2s could shapeshift their bodies, a feature that Murray's Magic Coat Rack has, a coat rack with the ability to morph its shape and size for any purpose. Murray's brand new Cleanovac also features the ability to grow and shrink for various cleaning purposes. Murray using the Mimic 1 program in all his automated household chore robots is exactly the reason why I believe this game takes place way after the Mimic story. But you want to know another damning piece of evidence for this? The security doors around the facility. These are blast doors. Now, what would a place like Murray's Costume Manor need doors such as these? They would only need them if they were aware of the potential risk a Mimic could cause. Edwin and Fazbear would only know this if Secret of the Mimic takes place after the initial discovery of the original Endo. I believe that this game is intended to be the middle story of Edwin Murray, the one that would pay off both the Mimic story's foreshadowing and the past Edwin alluded to in The Storyteller. It's noteworthy given what we've discussed so far that I don't think we're simply here to collect the original Mimic Endo, but instead we're here to contain it. Us going in to capture and contain the Mimic would allow Fazbear to remove the cause of the incident from the location, enabling them to cover up the event from the public's consciousness. While we may have just cracked the code for why we're here in the first place, there are still some loose ends left by the epilogues that the game's teasers might allude to and answer. The epilogues open with a team of construction workers clearing out Freddy Fazbear's Pizzaplex. While the process is underway, a shipment of Endos arrives on their doorstep containing a burnt Mimic fitted with a shiny head. Mimic has clearly been through a fire at some point in its past, and considering Help Wanted 2's foreshadowing of a fire at a fall fest and the second MCM Archives film reel burning up, I think one of the endings of Secrets of the Mimic will result in MCM going up in flames, explaining its burnt appearance upon its Pizzaplex arrival. While Secrets of the Mimic has the opportunity to answer all of these questions, there is one last thing that the books allude to that we haven't yet seen pay off, and that would be the Mimic's association with hide and seek. Tiger Rock, another avatar of the Mimic 1 program, in a story with the same name, recalls a time when they learnt about a game of hide and seek long ago. And again, in FNAF's newest book, Escape the Pizzaplex, Gregory, who during the book is under the influence of Glitchtrap, plays a game of hide and seek night after night with Cassie. Whenever Mimic came to learn about a game of hide and seek, it is also linked to the same massacre at MCM within the epilogues. What would the main gameplay of Secrets of the Mimic be if not a giant game of hide and seek? There are a few more predictions I have for this game, but rather than prolonging the duration of this video, I think I'll leave the rest in a pinned comment down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing and tapping the bell to stay notified on when I upload next and liking the video. It's appreciated. Take care, and I hope you all enjoy your day/evening.